After the latest Toronto Blue Jays loss, we can now confirm that huge changes are on the way for this team. They had a two-run lead heading into the bottom of the ninth, a one-run lead heading into the bottom of the ninth inning yesterday, and then the San Francisco Giants walked it off with a wild pitch from Trevor Richards, and the season of never-ending blunders for the Blue Jays continues. Nick, this is just it's getting worse and worse by the day. Welcome into Jay's Digest, everybody. I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. And Nick, just keeps getting worse, man. There's no
Yep.
other way to put it. And just when we thought not a turning point, because I'm not that delusional. I think I've come to the conclusion that the Blue Jays are not going to make the playoffs. They actually have a 1.7% chance of doing so, and no math guy, but those odds, no good, Nick. No good. You want to be above that threshold if you want to be competing in October, but the Jays are not. So I wasn't delusional in the sense that I thought that Seattle Mariners series was going to turn the season around and propel this team forward, but it was fun. It was fun to watch the team play well and do well against a team that has, to put it quite frankly, owned them in the past few years. So it was great. I was in the building for those games, and the vibe there was immaculate. And I can confirm that because Vancouver fans don't have to watch the Blue Jays 81 times a year at home. So that's why they're so raucous and rowdy when they do see the Jays one time a year in Seattle. But Nick, we thought that could have been a step in the right direction or at least get this team back on track. And yesterday confirmed that it just wasn't.
Yeah, and right after the loss, or really this morning, a report came out from a very notable reporter that moves are coming, like we predicted, anyways. But you mentioned it. It was fun to watch the Seattle Mariners game. I had a bit of hope going into the ninth inning yesterday, and it was all crushed. And Peter, let's just dive into it. This was from Mark Feinsand an hour or two ago. So this morning, maybe a few hours ago, as of the time of uploading. But according to sources, the Blue Jays have told other clubs that they are willing to move players with expiring contracts, but those with control beyond 2024 are not being traded, and the consensus among a dozen executives we spoke to is that the Jays will attempt to move all the rental players and working to add some prospects to a farm system that is quite frankly very bad, especially with the suspension of Aurelvis Martinez. So Peter, a pretty big update here, and this is kind of something that we knew, but it's the first time a notable reporter has come out and said it. The Jays are going to sell off their rentals, and we'll get into who those are in a second, but do you have any thoughts on that? Again, we're talking about Kikuchi, we're talking about maybe even Danny Jansen, and you mentioned it, Toronto, at this point of the season, have a 1.7% chance to make the playoffs. So they had no choice but to really just end this experiment this season.
Yeah, you got to pull the plug on this season, and it just hasn't gone the Blue Jays' way. And we didn't, we were hopeful coming into the season, but that's just us being fans, right? That's us hoping that the team does well and thinking that things will be different. And it has been a little bit different for Vladdy in some cases. Some guys have had better seasons than we expected them to have, but the guys that were supposed to be key cogs in this Blue Jays team have just not been up to snuff. And that starts with Bichette. That starts with George Springer, even though he has turned it around lately. Like we've had a lot of guys underperform this season, Nick, and that's a direct correlation to the record that they're boasting right now, 41 and 50. It's not good enough. And the league wide, the performance has been down from a lot of teams, and maybe that gave the Blue Jays a little bit more hope and allowed them to hold on to
Yeah.
some assets longer than we expected them to. But I think now is just the right time to go ahead and try and stock up on your farm system and try to get something in return for guys that, quite frankly, don't have a place on this team in the next 5 years. Like Jimmy Garcia, he's been great this year, but that's even more reason to go ahead and trade him. Kikuchi had his best outing of his career yesterday, and it still wasn't enough to get over the finish line and secure a W. So I think rival teams are looking at these players and they can help them out in their pursuit of a championship. The Blue Jays, that ship has sailed. I know the Yankees are struggling right now. I know that there's a bit more openness in the AL East, but the Jays just don't have any chance right now. And it's better to get some assets and try to stockpile some assets. I don't believe that they're going to get any groundbreaking moves done. I don't think Jimmy Garcia is going to net you a top 20 prospect in Major League Baseball, but I do think he can get someone in return that'll help you in the near future, if not the distant future. So I think that's definitely something to explore for the Blue Jays. And it's exciting because we're finally going to turn the page on this never-ending era of misery that the Blue Jays have put us through. There was high expectations for the Vladdy and Bo era, and they just failed to deliver time and time again. And I think this is it. The experiment is over, like you said, and it's time for the Blue Jays to explore other options. Now, what I've seen, Nick, the overwhelming sense is that fans don't want the Blue Jays current front office to be the one making these moves. I don't know what you feel about that.
Yeah, that's there's a lot of different things on the surface. You mentioned it. You can see the list here at the top of pending free agents, which is Kikuchi, Garcia, Turner, Kiermaier, and Richards. I suspect every one of those to go, aside from maybe Kiermaier. I'm not sure how much value he has, but he could be a good fourth outfielder for some team. So they're going to trade all those guys. They're going to stock up the prospect, the farm system a little bit, and they'll probably, and they definitely will keep Vladdy and Bo. But do you want Ross Atkins to be the guy who makes these trades? Because his job is definitely on the line. John Schneider, I don't know how much longer he has left. Maybe they'll let him ride out the rest of the year, depending on what they plan to do. But do you want Ross Atkins, the guy who built this team in the past few years, to really be the one who's trading for prospects? Because if it was up to him, he'd probably go out and buy to make a final chance at his job here. And that's the issue with this. That being said, I think prospects, it's good. Like, they're going to be able, I mean, you mentioned it's kind of exciting. This is the first time in years that they're actually, at least seemingly, going to sell, get some prospects back, and they're not completely tearing it down. They're retooling. They're still going to keep their core. I would say they extend Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at this point sometime in the offseason. Bo, we don't know yet. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they extend him too, but they're going to retool, and just this season, it's a lost cause at this point. At least it seems that way. A 1.7% chance of making the postseason, unless they go on a miraculous run. But Peter, the trade deadline is 20 days away. So even if they win 20 in a row, they're still barely competing for a wild card spot. They wouldn't even be leading the AL East, assuming that the other teams continue to play like 500 baseball. So at this point, the deadline's approaching. They need to make moves, and they're going to. I don't know who's the guy to do it, but I can't see them letting go of Ross Atkins at this point, 20 days before the deadline.
No, I definitely think he's going to be the one making these decisions. So if not, maybe Mark Shapiro is going to have a huge say in that because he's obviously shown the willingness to be a hands-on president from his time dating back in Cleveland. And whether that's a good thing or not, I don't know. I'm not in those rooms. I'm not in those discussion rooms, but the era as a whole, the Atkins Shapiro era has been a total failure. There's no other way to put it. I mean, no playoff wins. It's just it hasn't worked out for them. And now is the time to go ahead and make those moves. Now, I think Kikuchi can net you a good return. I think Jimmy Garcia can get you someone decent as well. And Justin Turner too. I think Justin Turner and Trevor Richards are definitely guys to monitor. And one other name that I want to throw out there is Chad Green, Nick. And I know Chad Green is not an expiring deal per se. He's still got one more year past this season on in terms of contract, but I think that'll get you a great return because Chad Green is acting as the closer right now for the Blue Jays. So Romano is down with injury. Garcia is down with injury. And they've needed someone to step up. And Green has been pretty good for them this season. The stuff is still there despite the multiple injuries that he's had. And he's a reliable arm that has playoff experience. So I think Chad Green is definitely a name to monitor as well, even though he has 2 years left on his deal. I don't know how much how valuable he is to the Blue Jays in the next 2 seasons. He's not valuable this year, and he's not valuable next season as well because I don't expect them to be any better next year. So I don't know. I think Chad Green is a name to monitor as well. What do you think?
Yeah, 1.5-ish ERA, and he's been the best reliever the Jays have. And Keegan Matheson came out yesterday and said that he's a good chance and that he's likely to get traded. And at this point, I wouldn't even care. I'm fine with that. Get as many assets as you can, completely restock the farm system, go from a 24th ranked prospect farm system maybe to like a maybe top 15 or something, depending on obviously who they get. Now, that would be big return for that to happen. But I just want to see prospects, exciting things. I don't think they're going to go for super young guys. I think they're going to go for guys that are ready to play in the MLB pretty soon. Just younger players, not even necessarily pure prospects. But let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on that. And do you want to see the Blue Jays make some moves? And out of these players, who would you want the Jays to keep? Even though at this point, I think they're all on the table. But that'll wrap it up. Thank you guys for watching. See you soon.